Good morning, everyone. Just give it another couple of minutes for some more people to arrive. Happy Friday. It's lovely and sunny out there. It is a bit cold as well, though, isn't it? Right, so we've got 16 so far in. Let's see. Okay, we'll make a start. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for the PRINCE2 overview webinar. My name is Jean-Paul. I'm head of client services at SPOCE, and with me today is our PRINCE2 trainer, Harley Richards. Now, whether you're a seasoned project manager looking to refine your skills or new to the field and eager to learn, PRINCE2 offers a robust, scalable framework for managing projects of any size and complexity. During this session, we'll explore how PRINCE2 provides a clear structure, roles and responsibilities that empower organizations to deliver projects successfully, on time, within budget, and to a high standard. Now, here's what we'll cover over the next 60 minutes. What is PRINCE2? An overview of the methodology and its principles, core elements, i.e. the themes, processes, and tailored approaches that make PRINCE2 unique. The benefits of adopting PRINCE2 for your projects and organization, and also, of course, the certification pathways. Now, feel free to share your thoughts or questions in the chat box during the presentation. We'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end to address any specific queries. Now, without further ado, let me pass you on to Harley.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jean-Paul. I think that's quite a nice introduction there as to what PRINCE2 is. If any of you guys are newbies to the method or to project management itself, I think that's covered a great amount already. So I think we'll just get straight into the detail, okay? You notice we're on the PRINCE2 7 version here, okay? Some of you might just know it as PRINCE2, but PRINCE2 7 came into play just over a year ago, and it simply means we're in the 7th edition of PRINCE2. So if any of you aren't familiar with that extra number 7 that got thrown on the end, it's just the version 7 that got added, okay? Now, I think the first question we'll address, okay, is why we're running PRINCE2 over, other methodologies, yeah? Because there are plenty of other project management methodologies that exist, okay? PRINCE2 really stands out from the crowd as it is one of the longest, and I'm gonna get the little pen out here. Let's see what we got. This point down here is where I'm looking at, yeah, for you guys. PRINCE2 has been in play since 1996, and the first course was actually run by us at SPOCE Project Management in 1997. So somewhere we've got a copy of certificate number 1 in one of our cabinets somewhere. I wouldn't know where to find it at the moment, but we do have certificate number 1 for the PRINCE2 method. So it's been tried and tested, okay? I don't know how many of you guys are joining from the UK or maybe somewhat abroad overseas, but it's the central method that UK government has used for, well, not hundreds of years, but decades now, a couple of decades just over, yeah? It is a best practice method, therefore, yeah, because it's been tried and tested. We've had little tweaks and changes, and I'm going to cover when we get into the methodology in a moment some of those tweaks and changes. Those of you might be rejoining this thinking, well, what's the changes, what's the state of PRINCE2 now since the last time I saw it? I'll show you some of those tweaks and changes. And the thing is, with this methodology, it just keeps getting a little bit better and a little bit better, yeah. And it's never going to be absolutely perfect because they know they can keep getting better. And one day we're going to see PRINCE2 8 keeping it at the front of everyone's minds, qualifications and skill set. It's that best practice element that pushes us forward. Now, of course, you guys have probably heard there are 2 levels for PRINCE2. And I know Jean-Paul there mentioned certification and qualification routes. We're going to do all that chat at the end, okay? I do appreciate that's where a lot of people's questions may come from, but particularly, okay, we're going to look at the differences between foundation and practitioner. I might even throw in a couple of tips and tricks for you as well, should you go on to do those examinations. It is a globally recognized method. If you're now looking at the top left, let's put a little ring around that one as well. It is a globally recognized project management method. So if you are joining from outside of the UK, great, because it's also recognized across the globe. Okay, and you'll find that some of the fastest growing Prince2 markets are places like Australia, Denmark, Kazakhstan, and even if you look over in the States, there's a lot of training being done in the hotspots, the New Yorks, the Miamis, and so on. So there's a lot of training going on in those places in the world. It is a internationally recognized qualification. No matter where you apply, people will know Prince2. Now, the last ones we're not going to put rings around so much because they're slightly more generic here. Yeah, we've had thousands of people now qualified. I would be interested to know if we're actually into the millions now, but thousands of people have become qualified in Prince2. And we all have this shared understanding, this shared language and knowledge that just makes a Prince2 project manager a Prince2 project manager. Yeah. It is part of this PeopleCert suite of methods. And if you're not familiar with PeopleCert, they are the accrediting body, and they've got lots of other methods. Now, the bonus of going for a PeopleCert methodology is that if you ever then do look to do other levels, be that program management, portfolio management, you might do a bit of risk management. PeopleCert have got other qualifications that just link up to Prince2, and Prince2 of course links up to them. I'm not going to get into that level of detail today. We're not going to start looking at where the links might be, but it's just for you guys to know the bonus of going for Prince2 over some of these other methodologies. It's part of that PeopleCert suite, and everything links together. This is one puzzle piece of the big picture. So that's Prince2. Yeah, a little bit extra on Prince2 after what Jean-Paul has introduced you guys with. Let's get into some methods. Yeah, some of the actual method itself, and have a look at maybe some of the early chapters here. The characteristics of a project are on the slide. Okay. Now, cross-functional, uncertainty, temporary, unique, and change. Now, fundamentally, every project is a means of change. Yeah, they introduce change. We don't run projects to keep things the same. And you'd be surprised how many organizations do run projects just to keep things running. And they run projects as if it's business as usual. Prince2 has a very clear cut. You've got business as usual for generating revenue, and projects for generating change and changing your direction, giving you new tools and equipment and so on. So in Prince2, we're very much focused on that change, and we're going to look at outcomes and benefits when you actually get into some of the methodology itself. What Prince2 does recognize is that every single project is unique. Okay. No two projects you run will ever be the same. And this even comes down to those of you that do what I like to call the rinse and repeat projects. Some of you might know them as copy paste projects, but we're very much talking about manufacturing projects, projects that are manufacturing maybe goods or parts. If I ask you to, let's say, build me a school, yeah, and I give you, I don't know, 12 months to build me the school, £1 million, and I give you the blueprint for the school. You don't need to do any designing. I've given you the exact blueprint of how you build the school. And you guys will have done your Prince2 training. You'll be great project managers by then. You're going to build me the school exactly how I asked, to £1 million within 1 year. Yeah, perfect. And this time next year, I might say, well, build me an identical school. And I'm going to give you another £1 million and another year to build it. Now, I've given you everything. Everything is identical. All your resources, all your preamble is exactly the same. All of your guidance as to where I want you to go with your project is exactly the same. But the project itself, the story in which you will develop this school, will be different. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. If we're talking about construction for a moment, and we're talking about building a school, you might have different weather. You may have different costs of materials or availability of materials. You might have different staffing, staff that have gone on leave, staff that have left the organisation, some staff that have joined the organisation. Maybe there's different national holidays you've got to take, okay? Just because you're building the same product with the same set of resources, the same setup, that does not mean your project is identical. That's a good one for anyone that is in a manufacturing background. Projects being unique, every single project changes every time. Sure, you might have some things that are sort of fundamental, like the design of the school in this scenario, perhaps. but the way in which you develop it, the story you go through to get there, will be different every time. Now, the next element here is the fact that projects are temporary, okay? Please, projects don't just run on and on and on. Yeah, and I see this so many times when I'm doing my teachings of organizations that say, oh, we've just extended it again, and we've extended it again, and we've extended it again. And PRINCE2 puts a fundamental block in the road of that. It's saying, look, there is a defined deadline. Now, I like to use some wacky examples in my training, okay? And some of you guys may not like what I'm about to say, but Christmas is coming. Yeah, and we talk about a temporary project. Christmas is a temporary project because it has a defined deadline. Yeah, we know when the 25th of December is here, that's it. Christmas is done. You know, we are on the final day. It's the handover, if you like. Everyone's exchanging gifts. And then you are released from that Christmas present buying, Christmas exchanging project. You are back into your business as usual and enjoying all of the things that you may have received for Christmas. Yeah. Projects are exactly the same. Projects are temporary. We have a deadline. There is a time when things need to be handed over. We're going to look at maybe having a little bit of wiggle room on that deadline in a couple of slides' time when we look at tolerance, which is a big feature of PRINCE2. Those of you that have done this before were probably waiting for that word tolerance to crop up. And if you haven't seen tolerance before, I've got some cool examples coming up in a moment. I'm going to look at cross-functional next, okay? Because this cross-functionality of PRINCE2 project says this: you will have a team that have been merged together purely for the purpose of your project. And who your line manager may be in business as usual does not have to correlate to your project role. And your hierarchy in business as usual does not have to correlate to your project role. Now, some of you might be coming from organizations where this does match, and that's perfectly fine. PRINCE2 says it just doesn't have to be that way. Okay, and I really do think that's a fair point to make. It was a project I was involved with a few years ago of redesigning a school canteen. Okay, and you have the chef out back, you've got the canteen operator, the cash register operator, and you've got an IT technician who on this project had never spoken to one another. Yeah, maybe the cash register person had sold the IT gentleman his lunch before, but they'd never spoken in a business sense. They'd never had to have any conversations about what they get up to. But the project they were running was about inputting a new sales system, a new cash register system. And suddenly all three of these people who had never spoken, and they work on opposite sides of this, this large school. It was a high school, a senior school here in the UK. They'd never spoken. And yet we pulled them together on this project, and I believe they're still in touch now. It's been a couple of years since I spoke to them, but there was a cross-functional element of the project where, look, I might park my day-to-day role. I'm gonna, leave my day-to-day hierarchy and join this temporary function, but appreciate that I'm gonna be working with a new group of people. Now, the final element here, this final characteristic of any project, let alone a PRINCE2 project, is this idea of uncertainty. Because, and this does slightly link to the unique point, okay, where I said that every project can be different from the previous. This uncertainty point means that your projects can be reshaped and changed at any time. With projects being temporary, it also means they could be closed at any time, okay? You don't know the things you don't know, and you don't know things that might be coming up. Yeah, we're not even sure if the things we do know about might even happen. So with a great big question mark over different elements of our project, we need to have a little look at risk, okay? And we're not going to dive right into risk management here because it's one of the best topics in PRINCE2, one of the largest, it's got the most detail. But if I just skim the surface for you, you've got to control your uncertainties. You've got to control your unknowns. And the wonderful thing about PRINCE2 is that we have a very specific practice, the risk management practice, in the core text that gives you a procedure, tips, tricks, paperwork, such as a risk register and an example of a risk register. It's a fantastic little chapter there, okay? So there's your 5 characteristics of a project. Like I say, particularly the ones that PRINCE2 identify. Now, if any of you are interested in doing a PRINCE2 foundation, This would be an example PRINCE2 foundation question. Yeah. You get 60 questions on the foundation, and I'm going to do all the exam information at the end. But a typical exam question could be, which of the following is, or perhaps is not, a characteristic of a project? And so you'd know these 5, and if there was a bogey answer in there, that would be the one that's not. Or perhaps you get a couple of answers or 3 answers that are incorrect, and maybe one of these being the true statement. That's a very typical foundation question. Okay, just opening the door on that conversation for later on. So what makes a good project? Okay, and what does PRINCE2 consider a good project to be? Well, let's have a little look here. I'm going to tick them off as we go. These are the ones that PRINCE2 declares standard. Okay, a project needs to be delivered on time and on budget. And PRINCE2 talks about time and money as the standard variables. Okay, these 2 elements here are the ones that they don't hold any extra weight over the others, but they're called the standards because they're asked about the most. If any of you are in a project manager's position, how often are you asked the question, are we on time, are we on budget? Yeah, how are we doing in terms of meeting the deadline, and how's that cash in the bank going? Yeah, how quickly are we draining through it? Those are the 2 standard variables. They're the ones that simply get asked about the most. Now, in terms of the methodology, what makes a good project? You have to meet some sort of need. You have to meet some sort of objective. And I'm going to pair these together here, okay? I always declare that you have a user or a customer that has wants or needs. Yeah, I want, I need. And it's up to you to then work out, right, what sort of product are they after? Let's establish some clear objectives, okay? And that will be things like your acceptance criteria, particularly if you're going to start working in some quite complex, intricate projects where the products reflect that complexity. Those objectives need to be ironed out. I'm a big fan of having data down on paper, information on paper. I must stress, not necessarily on paper, can of course be web-based, but I want to see some evidence of your objectives. I like to see these targets, these acceptance criteria, and particularly if I then draw it up here, I like to see what your project goals are. Okay, now in terms of the goals, we're going to look at benefits. We're going to look at benefits management in a moment. It's one of the things we will cover in this overview. But in PRINCE2, we look at benefit very much in a place of, am I going to get more good back from this project than I put in? Yeah. And if we're going to talk about it as human beings, am I going to make more money than I spend? Yeah. Now, PRINCE2 doesn't explicitly say more money, but it's well referenced that that's roughly what they're looking at. Of course, there's non-numerical benefits as well. That could be things like increased staff motivation. It could be increased brand reputation. Sure, those are all benefits, but PRINCE2 really hones you in on, look, am I going to get return on investment here? Yeah. And that's really where we start looking. It does, of course, nod to the fact that not all projects might be run to deliver profit or get money off of the change, okay, or money out of the change rather, because some projects will be run to maybe keep you in line with legislation. Maybe there's some laws and regs that are changing that you need to update certain things you do. You might run a project for this. PRINCE2 is saying, look, you can do that, but the majority of projects you want to run for cash. Yeah. Now, a well-planned project, this point here, very vague. Yeah. And this is actually one of the slides lifted from the beginning of a PRINCE2 course. And I always say, well, what makes a well-planned project? Okay. Is it we've got the scope of the product detailed? We've got all of the team in the right place? Is it we've got a schedule, a robust schedule with suppliers that have already been procured and committed to the schedule? Have we got good budget management or risk in issue management? And in truth, all of that makes a well-planned project. Yeah, the planning element, just like risk that I mentioned a moment ago, the plans practice in the PRINCE2 methodology is the largest. Okay, it's only risk that can somewhat equal it, but planning is the largest. And again, for clarity, those of you that are doing exams, they will always give you an extra question on plans. Yeah, in that practitioner paper, there is just that extra little mark to be had for understanding PRINCE2 planning. Now, in PRINCE2, we focus on the products, and we're going to look at principles in a moment. We have a product-based planning approach that we need to have a little look through. It won't be done today, but we have this pure focus on this is what I need to build, and this is how I'm going to build it. And the reason PRINCE2 has a planning, product-based planning approach is I'll play this little game with you here, okay? I'd like each of you to build me an engine. And shut your eyes for a moment. If you're in the webinar, you can shut your eyes and sit there and think, well, okay, Harley has asked me to build an engine. What sort of engine have you just built? I bet most of you built a car engine. Yeah. Some of you might have built a boat engine, maybe a motorcycle engine. Maybe some of you built a jet engine. I tell you what, I bet none of you built me a search engine. And that's where I suddenly say, this is why we focus on the product before we get too deep into things. You need to know what you're building before you get the show on the road. Yeah, I can't tell you, run away and build me an engine without telling you what sort of engine that needs to be. Now, moving on slightly to the engage stakeholders. Those of you that have done PRINCE2 before, this has had quite an overhaul, this engaged stakeholders side of things. This is one of those areas where we've now added a people element to PRINCE2, and we actually do cover some soft skills. A little bit more on that's coming up in the latter slides of this session, but engaging stakeholders, understanding people is a new topic for PRINCE2. It's one of the ones that got added with PRINCE2 7, like I say, just over 12 months ago, I think 13, 14 months ago now. Engaging stakeholders, understanding people is a new element for PRINCE2. So we'll get into that in a moment's time. Yes, every project needs to be relevant. There's not much to say on relevant, okay? But if you've got a problem, do design a product that meets the problem, kind of linking to your objectives there. But look, if I say to you guys, you know, I'm not traveling across the country fast enough, I need a new mode of transport, don't cook me a roast dinner. Yeah, you design a product that meets the need, and that goes back to that needs met, objectives met, make sure what you're doing is relevant to the wider context. And we can look at context if you went through the full course. We've got a whole session on how we establish this wider context of the world in which we live. And of course, well managed. Over here on the right hand side, the last one, yeah, what makes a good project? Well, a well managed project. I think it's a bit of fun that we throw this one in here, okay? A well-managed project, what does well-managed mean? Well, truthfully, when I run this slide at the beginning of any of my training sessions, we go on to have a little look into this. And of course, that takes days. We understand all of the different areas of project management, and we give you little tips, tricks, tools, not only to get through an exam, okay? And I think that's a nice thing if you are looking at getting certified. Myself and the other trainers here at SPOCE, we can teach you to go through exams, but we want to teach you how to go and manage these projects properly. We'll give you examples and tips and tricks, and it's that well-managed point that I think you get quite a lot of value from. And so with that in mind, let's have a look at what the value actually is, or rather the benefits to you of having PRINCE2. Now, you will gain a globally recognized certification. I've done this bit already, not going to go over it too much again, but it is an internationally recognized qualification. You are able to get things like digital badges. You will have an actual certificate to prove you've done this. You will appear on a successful candidate register. So you can see if anyone has passed PRINCE2 by looking at the successful candidate register. This is the one that I was just talking about there, yeah? You will actually know how to start, manage and close a project. Yeah, and there's one thing just to get you through a methodology, but knowing how to do that practically, there's a lot of value. Yeah, yes, you might have the ticket, but I think there's an extra thing and an extra element to our training that we try and give you is, look, we don't just want you to get through the method, we want you to actually go and apply this. Those of you that have done PRINCE2, yeah, maybe later on in the Q&A, you might want to reference some of the terminology, but PRINCE2 has a very specific set of terminology, okay? We use language that other methodologies don't use. And that's to make sure that PRINCE2 project managers all communicate with one another in a similar or same fashion. Yes, we can do some tailoring for sure, but in PRINCE2, we particularly look at the keywords you're going to be using, the names you give certain documents and products. Terminology is a massive benefit of PRINCE2. You can tell a PRINCE2 project manager from a mile away, even from the words they put down on paper before you might actually get to them in some sort of interview. You will know how to structure your project. Now, PRINCE2 has a set of processes. Processes, there are 7 of them. We're going to look at them in a little while, okay? But these are the building blocks or the chapters of your story, if you like, that take you through beginning, middle, and end. And you will have a very clear process to follow, well, very clear structure with your processes to follow. Improve your career prospects. I'm actually going to pull this up with the next one as well. Maybe it's not a new job you're looking for. Maybe it's not a pivot into the industry itself, but maybe you're just looking at climbing the ladder, yeah? And maybe you want to grow in your own organization. Having PRINCE2 is a massive elevating tool, massively elevating tool. Because it's so well recognized, it really does help you climb that ladder, okay? And there's that final point. Understand your role as a project manager. One of the big problems I've found over the last, let's say, roughly decade, I would say, maybe just under, but you've got projects that go wrong or projects that fail, where when you say, whose job was this? Everyone starts pointing at one another and no one owns it themselves. And the point with this here is that by having PRINCE2, you not only understand your role, you also understand everyone else's. Yeah, and you know who should be doing what, and that allows you to create a very clear set of roles and responsibilities, which is linking to one of our principles we'll have a look at in a moment. So what are our aspects of PRINCE2? Okay, and these are better known as our variables. Okay, let's do them one at a time. These are important. Yeah, of course, costs. We've got to manage costs. Why is it important to manage costs? We don't want to overspend. We don't want to miss any opportunities. Maybe we can cut costs in places. Yeah, everyone wants more for less. And in this modern world that we live in, I call it trimming the fat. Yeah, you've got a project and you want to get rid of some of that extra, some of that unnecessary stuff. With costs, that's the biggest place you can do this. Okay. Time. What happens if time isn't managed? Yeah, with time, most people appreciate that we have a deadline. Okay, I'll go back to that Christmas example. Okay, Christmas is coming and we do have a deadline, the 25th of December, all got to be ready for it. But also with time, we are going to look at the elements of, well, what happens if we finish too early? Yeah, Christmas is the 25th of December. Does that mean I start cooking my roast dinner today? No, it doesn't, because there's an optimum delivery window. So when we talk about variables, there is an optimum range of which we look at. And then quality. And if any of you have done any other methodologies, you'll see that these are the 3 that most methodologies will sit upon, okay? Because quality is also a variable. Just think of a hotel. Is it a 3-star hotel? A 5-star hotel? Do we want to go in the middle? We're trying to aim for a 4-star hotel. Quality is a variable. And, you know, that should be noted. This is the big new one that's been added for PRINCE2 7. Sustainability. People, sir, when updating the method, wanted to put an exaggeration on being as green as possible. Yeah, and that's not a hard ruling of go and be green, but they're asking you to have a green mindset. Yeah, and be as conscious for the environment as possible. That is, of course, a variable. In terms of sustainability, you might go to the nth degree and be as green as possible. Or you might decide, actually, you know, maybe it's not so viable for us to go that far. We don't have the facilities, but we start putting plans in place to get there. Yeah. Sustainability is our new variable. Going back to some of the old school ones, we've got scope. Okay. Now, I don't know if any of you guys have heard of scope before. You guys that have done PRINCE2 before will have, but if you haven't, scope is very simple for me. And I always describe scope as what's in and what's out of our project. Okay, and if we use the school, those of you that have been here from the start, we're building a school, aren't we? And I've told you we've got the designs for the school already laid out with £1 million and a year to build it. Well, what is the design for the school? Well, maybe in scope, we're going to say it's going to have 10 classrooms, maybe it'll have 2 assembly halls, a staff room, a playing field. That's everything that's in scope. But what's out of scope? Well, it's not going to have a tennis court and it's not going to have a swimming pool. Yeah. It's not that sort of school. It doesn't need those things. It needs the classrooms and the staff room and so on. But what's out of scope is the tennis court, is the swimming pool. Don't need those things. Maybe if we have a bit of time left and a bit of cash at the end of the project, we might decide to actually put in a swimming pool or a tennis court if we have the other variances or variables available to do so. But scope is what's in and what's out. Then there's risk. And simply, I can ask, what might happen if you don't manage risk? And that's an open-ended question because it's risk, it's uncertainty. We don't know. We need to keep control of these uncertainties. And it might be that you only experience little risk on the project and you only take on smaller risks on your project. Or it might be the other way around. Yeah. And we look at things like the risk appetite, we look at your risk processes and procedures, and we look at stereotypical and common responses to risks, as well as some of PRINCE2's own for mitigation. Okay. The final variable is benefit. Benefits can grow and shrink at any time. A good idea in the first day of your project may not maintain to be a good idea moving forwards, okay? Benefits grow and shrink. The cash you're expected to return may change. That could be based on competition. It could even be based on weather or location or inflation or change of government. It could be all sorts, okay? Benefits grow and shrink and they need to be monitored and evaluated. In PRINCE2, if those benefits shrink too small, close your project. If you are not going to make your return, if you're not going to make money back, there's no point in doing it. And in PRINCE2, it's very clear. If I go and visit an organization and I look through all of their projects and I say, what's this one here? Why are you running this project? And they say, oh, just because. Just because is not an answer. Yeah, I want to say, why are you running this project? And then I want them to reply with, because we're going to get these things in return. Just because is not an answer, okay? And so with that, let's have a little look at the 5 integrated elements, okay? Now this is changed again because you have this people element in the middle. This is again a new element for PRINCE2.7. Some of you guys that did some of the old versions, this is a new visual for you all, okay? I'm going to do people last and start right at the top. The project context. Because one of your key elements of your project is knowing your wider world, okay? And so with project context, we're talking about, do I work for a charity? Do I work for a government? Am I working in a certain nation? Is there certain elements of the society that I'm in that do or don't support my project? It's the wider world. And so when we talk about projects being unique, earlier on, you guys that were here from the start of this session will remember all projects are unique. It's predominantly the context that's going to give it that unique element, okay? You can be in different environments, work with different people and see different parts of the world with projects. That's your context. Now let's get into the traditional 3, okay? Practices, processes, and principles. The principles are your rules. Okay, the principles are the one element of PRINCE2 that has stood the test of time. When it was created back in '96, the principles were made, and maybe apart from the slight wording tweak here and there, purely for printing purposes, the principles still hold up the same values that they did back in '96. Okay, they are the rules. And I'll simply tell you now, if you don't stick to the principles, you are not running a PRINCE2 project. Black and white. What those principles are, we can discuss in a moment. The practices on the left are exactly as they used to be, okay? But some of you guys might be thinking, well, these used to be called themes. And you're absolutely right. Yeah, those themes you used to know, these are now practices. We've discussed a couple of them, plans and risk, we've already discussed. We've got a few more that we're going to have a look at in a slide or two's time. On the right-hand side, you have your processes. Now, I've mentioned these in principle already. These processes are your building blocks or your chapters of your story. They are the structured elements that guide you through a beginning, middle, and end, or rather closure and handover. And then the new one, and the one that ties all of this together, is people, okay? And if I bring you forward just a touch here, people in PRINCE2 has been added to talk about not only the people that are working on the project, but those that are affected by it. And a phrase that we've now thrown into PRINCE2 that underpins a lot of the methodology is people are central to the method, okay? People are central to the method. What we mean by that is without people, these projects won't run. Yeah, they won't run successfully, or they won't run at all. Because you need people, you need a project manager, you need an executive, you need user and supplier inputs, you need your team and team members, you need some project support and maybe some assurance, and then you need customers. You need to have a think about who your customer is and what they might want out, okay? Particularly, we start looking at the capabilities, the motivations, the relationships between people. All of that is crucial as to how we run a PRINCE2 project. And if you come on a training course, we will cover people on the first morning, because you need to have an understanding of who's involved and how we interact with each of these people and what drives them to be there, okay? Understanding that is fundamental to running a successful project. If I move on from people, like I say, that's our new element. Let's get into some of the old school stuff, yeah? The principles. I'm going to pull these up one at a time. Rule number one, principle number one, ensure continued business justification. Now, this does not say have business justification. Yeah, because we might all have projects that have got justification to start, but the wording of this is particular. You must ensure continued business justification. You've got an idea from the beginning of your project, and you need to make sure that idea is still just or still justified as you go through. And if you lose justification, you should be closing your project. So if you can no longer ensure continued business justification, pull the plug. That's it. Your project is done. Then we've got a learn from experience principle, very specific to PRINCE2 here, okay? But we have a learn from experience principle that says if you are not learning through your project, you should be seeking them out, you should be recording them and acting upon these lessons. If you're not learning, you're not following PRINCE2. One of the tools we've got to enable this is a lessons log, okay? That's one of the many documents that we can dive into on a training course. Defined roles, responsibilities, and relationships. This is talking about making sure we know who does what. Again, remember from earlier, I said we've got a lot of pointing going on as to whose responsibility is this or that or the other. With PRINCE2, we have defined job roles, responsibilities, job descriptions. We've got a defined hierarchy. The relationships with each other are set in stone. We know who does what. We know who's relied upon for what. And I like that. And PRINCE2 stops that it's my job, your job, our job situation from going on. Manage by stages is the next principle we'll have a little look at here. You don't plan the whole project up front. Okay, we've been building this school in this little session here. And if I say to you, it's day one of building the school, you've just put the spade in the ground to start digging the foundations. When are the light bulbs going to be fitted? It's like, well, at the end, yeah, sure. But when exactly? You don't know. And I'm not expecting anyone to know. We manage by stages in PRINCE2. So what we might do, and I'm going to do a little bit of doodling here, so forgive me if the slides get a little messy for a moment, but if we've got a project plan with, let's say, 4 stages, okay, what we might then do is create a stage-by-stage plan. And PRINCE2 manages by stages. Yes, we've got a high-level, sort of vague project plan, so we know that light bulbs might be fitted in the final stage, but until we get to sort of here-ish, we won't know when exactly the light bulbs might be fitted. We manage by stages. A phrase I like to use when we talk about managing by stages is, what's the best way to eat an elephant? It's a bite at a time. Yeah, and we just chunk the work up. We go through it step by step by step. Then we've got manage by exception. Now, you know those variables we were talking about a moment ago, time, cost, quality, sustainability, and so on. All of these things can have tolerance applied to them. In PRINCE2, we call this tolerance. It's also known as permissible deviation. But effectively, let's say that your budget for building the school is £1 million. Maybe I don't want you to spend any more than, let's say, £1.3 million and no less than 900,000. You are now welcome to manage by exception. Okay. As a project manager, I've given you authority to do whatever you like within these brackets. But if you are to break these brackets, let's say that you're forecasting you're going to spend more than 1.3 million, you must then escalate to me, the sponsor, yeah, your executive. But that's in essence what managed by exception is. And you can do the same for sustainability targets or benefit targets or risk targets and so on. That's managed by exception. If I tell you, build me a school and it's got to be done to £1 million, it's not likely to happen. Yeah, if I told you to build me a school and it must be £1 million to the penny, it's not going to happen. Don't hold yourself to that. But if I put a little bit of permissible deviation in play, if I give you tolerance, you're in a really, really strong place. Okay, bit of freedom for the project manager. I think that's one of the biggest benefits of PRINCE2 for a project manager is that you actually get given that responsibility of, oh, you know what, I can relax a little bit here because I know I can operate within these brackets. And if I go outside of these brackets, I'm escalating back to my executive. Hey, let's have a look at the next one. In terms of our next principle, you've got the focus on products principle. Remember, build me an engine. What sort of engine are we building? Car engine, bike engine, search engine? Focus on products in PRINCE2 says, know what you're building, know what the scope of this is, know what the quality should be, and then set about going to build it. Okay. And in terms of focusing on products, you need to have that established up front. This is a very linear way of building things in PRINCE2. We're stepping away from agile, which is a big buzzword in the industry. Okay. In PRINCE2, we're saying no, understand your product and then set about building it. Don't be designing on the fly. And the final principle we have here, the final rule, remember these principles are rules and they must be upheld, is that you tailor PRINCE2 to suit whatever project you're within. Okay. Everything in PRINCE2 can be tailored and adjusted apart from these principles. So when we talk about risk management, we might not be doing a full-blown risk management procedure. We might just be writing out a couple of rules and regs to help us stay health and safety compliant on the project. Okay. You get to tailor PRINCE2. You get to decide, and that the A word, okay, is appropriate. You get to decide what's appropriate on your PRINCE2 project. Then we're going to have a little look at practices, okay? In terms of practices, there are 7 once again, starting with the business case. And the business case is quite literally a document. I always draw them out like that when I'm doing my teachings. Yeah, they're a document usually held on a web service now, something like a SharePoint or a Google Docs or something like that. But it's a document that justifies the project itself. Now, these practices, again, previously called themes, are your tools. And it is that document, okay, that allows us to establish justification, establish whether or not the project is and remains desirable, viable, and achievable. 3 big buzzwords from the business case practice. Then we look at organising. Organising is where we talk about the roles of PRINCE2. We start saying, right, well, what exactly is the role of an executive? And what exactly is the role of a user representative or a senior user, as we call them? And what is the role of X and Y and Z? Organising really supports the defined roles, responsibilities, and relationships principle. and actually leans on the people element quite a lot. Yeah, people being in the middle here, the practice element very much leans on that and puts the hard rules in place. People talks about motivation, soft skills, even a little bit of change management now. Whereas organizing is talking about, right, but what actually is your job? What's the black and white? Then you've got plans. Okay, this is the plans practice we talked about, the largest practice and the one that you get the most exam questions on. And this is where we talk about how we go about planning. We know we've got a product-based planning technique in PRINCE2. A lot of questions will come up on that because it supports the focus on products principle. But how you go about planning, the styles of plans you produce will be covered in the plans practice. Quality is about the makeup of your product. What sort of quality are we going to build? Quality is, and this is the definition for PRINCE2, it's the degree of conformance or the fitness for purpose of a product or process. Yeah, degree of conformance or fitness for purpose. So if I tell you that I need a car, what sort of car do I need? Does it need to win the Formula One? Or does it just need to be able to drive me around town and get me to, the local shops and swimming pools and so on, wherever I want to go? They're very different cars, okay? And quality talks about, look, what actually is it that we're building? We've talked about this one already, the risk practice, okay? Where with risk, we talk about the uncertainty and controlling the unknown, controlling uncertainty, making sure we've got a good handle on things. If you don't manage risk, you are less and less and less likely to succeed in your project, because you need to be trying to predict what's coming up in the future and mitigating those uncertainties. Strong risk management often means you don't need to do the next one of issue management, but not always. Issues are things that are actually going wrong on your project. Now, some of these risks will become issues, but some of them will be, hey, I've just arrived at work and something's gone wrong. With issue management, we look at getting us back on track. Perhaps you have broken tolerance. Perhaps you do need to escalate to a sponsor or an executive. But with issue management, we're very much looking at how we get this show back on the road. Yes, things may have gone a little awry, but what strings can I pull to reel this back in and get this PRINCE2 project operating as it should? Which brings us on to, and it's always the last practice we cover, progress. Okay, because that's the whole point of this. We want to keep progressing. And in this progress practice, we talk about, are we going in the right direction at the right pace? Are we still achieving what we think we should achieve? How's my reporting going? So there's a bit on the practices for you there, guys. Your processes. Now, I'm not going to bring these up one by one, but I am going to change my color of my pen so you guys can see here. Yeah, look at that. That's much better. In these processes, just give you a quick overview of each, okay? Starting up a project process is all about this conceptual idea we have, okay? And I'm going to pop the word idea, yeah? Or this conceptual idea that we have and saying, look, what do we think of this? What's the product we've got? How do we solve this problem? Initiating a project is where we start actually putting detail on the idea. Yeah, this is not a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 approach. Some of these do loop. We just don't have time today to go through this full process model. Okay, but initiating a project is where we take the idea and we put detail onto this. Managing a stage boundary happens towards the ends of every stage, and managing a stage boundary is all about, forgive me if this is slightly poor handwriting, but it says what next, okay? Managing a stage boundary, and you can see there's another one here which would ask the same question, what next? If I'm at the end of this stage, if we have a manage by stage principle, it's in this process where I might draw out my next stage plan, stage by stage by stage, okay? And we build up that larger picture. Controlling a stage, okay, I'm going to pop it over on the right hand side and I'm going to put D to D. Controlling a stage is where we do the day-to-day management. This is where we do, and forgive me because it is just the name of this process, control a stage. They're not trying to catch you out with this one. Yeah, this is where the project manager will spend most of their time, and this is where they will pull all the different strings and keep a tight handle on the project. I like to say that controlling a stage is like sitting at the top of like a large 360-degree view glass tower. And in PRINCE2, in that glass tower, we would be pulling in risks over here, benefits over here. There's a bit of our team over here. There's some reports and progress coming in over here. And controlling a stage is where we are in the control center. Managing product delivery, okay, is the build section. This is where things actually get done. It's managing product delivery. Yeah, whatever we're producing, we are going through the steps to actually build this up. Now, directing a project is at the top and spans the whole project. And I'm literally just going to underline the word directing, okay? Because for this, we have a project board who will be setting out their vision for the project. They'll be making key decisions as we go through, approving stage plans, approving changes to plans. They'll be sorting issues out for us. Okay, this is direction, this is vision and guidance for the project itself. And then we get to closing a project, okay? And I'm just going to add the word control, okay? Because we're looking for controlled closure. A safe, secure handover of products, lessons learned have been reviewed, there's a large evaluation, and there's a shutting down of the project. Now, I have very much skimmed the surface. If you're going to look at the process model in full, we usually build up a project over the space of 45 minutes to an hour, where we go through where these processes might be shuffled up. You can see some of them are duplicated, and how we go about structuring a project altogether. But hopefully that's just a little insight to the processes for you. This is really the backbone, and what PRINCE2 is known for is its processes. People know that it's a process-based approach. You can see that on the left-hand side there, okay? Which really, we're beginning to get towards the end of this session now, guys, okay? And we're just going to have a little chat about context, because it is the last element we haven't discussed. And we're going to pull all of these up on the slide for you, I think, okay? In terms of context, we talk about your organizational context. PRINCE2 does not assume or require you to be part of any particular organization, okay? You can go and work in healthcare, you can go and work in education, you can come from the military background, engineering, any background you like, PRINCE2 can be adapted to, or you can adapt PRINCE2 rather to your organization, okay? We will not in PRINCE2 tell you how to do your job in your organization, but we will put framework in place to make that more efficient. Then there's the commercial context, where with this we look at, okay, who is the customer, who is the supplier? Yeah, and PRINCE2 has a very much split down, are you a customer background or are you a supplier background? A customer will want value for money, they will want change, they will want to see return on investment. A supplier will commit resources and they'll give you an invoice for it, and they'll want paying for that work. And so we separate those two fundamentals out and look at the commercial context. We do now, for those of you that are old school enough to remember PRINCE2 just being linear, we do actually talk about agile and how agile can be brought into PRINCE2. There's a separate method called PRINCE2 Agile. If any of you guys have done PRINCE2 Agile, wonderful. And if you haven't, I'm not going to cover it now, but I'm more than welcome to get one of the team to send over some details on PRINCE2 Agile, because we completely reshape PRINCE2 and have a look at how we can put it into an iterative life cycle. Sustainability is again this new element that's been added, never used to be here, but we are talking about being as green as possible, okay? We talked about sustainability as a variable earlier on. How green can we be? How green should we be? I would like to think that PeopleCert, when writing the method, wanted as many people to be as green as possible. But there's also a nod to say that is not always possible for people, because being green often comes with its costs, okay? And people sort of have a little nod to that in terms of economic balance as well. And then finally, we've got scale. In terms of context, are you cooking a roast dinner or are you building that school we were talking about? Scale is about how much or how little of PRINCE2 can and should you use. A fundamental principle we talked about was tailor to suit your project environment. And with scale, we'd look, how large can this go and how small can this go? What are the fundamentals? And those of you that have done this before will remember every theme, now practice, has its minimum requirements and they still exist. They're unchanged. There are some things that to shrink PRINCE2 down, you must fundamentally have, but then you can run away with it and go right up to the hills with a large scale PRINCE2 project. There's a reason why large international corporates use PRINCE2 and so do many governments. Okay. So a little bit more on context. Like I say, we're not going to dive into the depths of that now because that opens up all sorts of conversations to be had. The final thing from me, okay, before we get into a Q&A and a little bit more from Jean-Paul to end here, okay, are the 2 exams. Now, if you've done these exams, they're widely unchanged, okay, but you'll notice it's a closed book for foundation. It's a memory testing exam, okay, multiple choice. A, B, C or D, nice and straightforward, and you just need 36 to pass. It's only pass or fail. There's no higher levels for you guys to go and get stuck into. You can't go and get distinctions or merits if that's a question that you guys might have for the Q&A. It's just pass or fail. 60 minutes, 60 questions. I will just throw in here, it always concerns people when they hear 60 minutes, 60 questions. I can tell you from many years of experience and having put thousands of candidates through this, you probably won't get close to the 60-minute mark. Even on your first mock paper, people come in around 45 to 50 minutes. Yeah, because some of the questions are what I call gimme marks. Yeah, where you know them and you can move on and you can go back to the harder ones towards the end. So 60 minutes for 60 questions is more than enough time. Don't get scared by that. When you look at practitioner, it's no longer a memory testing exam. It is an open book examination, and you are welcome to use the PRINCE2 7 Managing Successful Projects official book. Look, this used to be called the manual, okay? But people didn't like the manual because it made it sound too much like a set of instructions. So now we've called it the Managing Successful Projects official book, okay? You can use that textbook and that textbook only. But of course, the bonus of that, if you've got the textbook, the answers are in front of you. You've just got to know where to find them and how to apply that textbook into a real world situation. The practitioner exam is 70 questions, so slightly more than it used to be. It used to be 68, but it's scenario based. Yeah. Looking at, here's a real world example. And then how do you apply PRINCE2 to it? And they give you the scenarios in advance. You're welcome to go and read them and understand them. And when you arrive to the exam, they'll say, excellent, for this, you are going to be using X scenario that you've already read. You've got a copy of it with you here in the exam. Now tell me, how would you apply PRINCE2? It's as simple as that. It is a multiple choice exam. It does have some matching style questions. So, maybe 1 to 6 and A to G and which ones go together. And there's a 60% pass mark for that. Now, here at SPOCE, we do have practice papers for both. And if you're on any of our training courses, we go through mock papers with you, look at the problem areas, and we bridge those gaps, okay, which is one of the features we build into our training courses to make sure that you not only have the understanding of the method, but you've also got an understanding of how to go and do these exams, because this is where most people do feel pressure. Most of you will understand the method by the end of the sessions, no problems at all, but we appreciate exams are the big topic people like to talk about and establish. So like I say, that's what we make sure we build into the training courses for you. And that's it from me for now, okay? I'm going to hand over to Jean-Paul and try and finish my cup of coffee while he talks to you for a moment. And I'll do your Q&As in a moment. Let's see what you guys have come up with. But thank you for your time. And Jean-Paul, away you go.
Thank you very much, Harley. That was a fantastic overview of PRINCE2. Before we go on to the Q&As, I'm just going to give you a bit more information about SPOCE. I know Harley covered some elements of it. For example, us being the first organisation to deliver the first ever PRINCE2 course. but we also delivered the first ever MSP course and the first ever Agile course. Okay, so we are pioneers within the industry of project management, program management, and change management. Some of you that are attending today would have attended our previous sessions. Now, again, recordings are available for all the sessions. So in case you've missed anything, you can play it back when you like. Now, there are comprehensive learning solutions for the PRINCE2 methodology. Okay, all of our trainers are very seasoned within a wide variety of industries, including the NHS and local government. I can see there's several NHS people attending today. If you are an individual inquiring on behalf of your company or your team, we do provide in-house training, both virtual and face-to-face, whatever suits the organization. Now, for individuals or self-funders, we do provide virtual instructor-led courses, which are scheduled regularly. For PRINCE2, it's one of the most popular courses for those that are beginning within project management or those that are looking to continue to recertify. Now, regardless of the choice you choose, it will always be a focus on immersive learning. So we tend to have smaller groups of students within these classes, and that makes for a better experience individually and also a bit more one-on-one time with trainers like Harley. Now, again, like I said, you'll get the recordings of the session. You will also get a Projects with ChatGPT e-book, again, a relevant topic. So if anyone's got any questions on that side of it, Harley can answer those as well. And you will also get a glossary and a brochure of the PRINCE2 methodologies. Now, everyone knows Black Friday is coming up. So we do have offers in place. So it is 40% off all the courses for Black Friday. If you've attended the course live today, there is additional discounts available. So you just need to email sales@spoke.com and then you'll receive the additional discount codes. Okay. With these courses and with these exams, if exams aren't necessarily your strong point, you can add exam safety net bolt-on products to the package. So we will tailor the package specific for your needs. Now, for corporate customers, there is also 40% off of the delegate fees. So this is a great opportunity and a great time of year to pre-book courses for your teams. Again, if you email sales@spoke.com. Okay. Now, let's move on to the Q&A session. I'm sure I can see there's already banked questions there, which is great news. I think this question was answered in the latter slides, Nipuni, but the question again is, can you please explain sustainability in a bit more detail?
Yeah, absolutely. So sustainability, that's the new area. And the idea of sustainability from PeopleCert, okay, is they want people to be as green as possible, okay? Now, there's no requirement from PeopleCert. They're not putting sustainability measures onto you or your organizations or your projects, because we appreciate, and PeopleCert appreciate that sustainability for one is not sustainability for another. Yeah, how much paper you might get through might not be relevant to an organization that's, you know, guzzling away with diesel engines, for example. Yeah, but what the point is saying, let's kind of merge this. I'm going to do a bit of doodling with the blank space on the slide here. Yeah, fundamentally, where's my red pen gone? Let's get it back. Fundamentally, there's like a hard cut off here, yeah? And this is where the law is, okay? Forgive me if there's some dodgy handwriting again, but there's the law, okay? And of course, you're not on this overview session to be told, don't break the law, yeah? That should be straightforward. But what PRINCE2 is saying is, look, if there's legislation, we want you guys to be further up this scale. Don't just do the minimum. PRINCE2 is saying, let's try and get people to be as green as possible. So maybe you have your target to be here. In terms of whatever the green thing is, you put your target about there. Then with sustainability tolerance, remember it is a variable, okay? We might say, well, actually, if that's the lower threshold of the law, why do we put our bracket here? Yeah, it's a very wise thing to do with this, okay? Because the last thing you want to do is put your bracket at the law. Yeah, because obviously the moment you then break the bracket, you've broken the law. Whereas what Prince2 is saying is put your bracket here. If you're spiraling down this way, if you break the bracket, you can use this as some sort of like trigger. It's saying, look, I'm edging closer and closer. We keep developing products that are increasing CO2 emissions, or we're using too much waste material, or you producing too much waste material. So it gives you something to say, right, how do we get back towards the target? Okay. Now, that sustainability, like I say, there's no hard thing of CO2 emissions or waste product or paper waste or what do I need to recycle, because Prince2 is scalable and adaptable for different industries. Okay. But that's in principle what we've got. Now, in terms of an upper threshold of tolerance, being totally honest with you, there usually isn't such a need for an upper threshold. The point of Prince2 is saying try and be as green as possible. But if you do put an upper threshold on sustainability, this might not be used to say, oh no, we're being too green, but might be used to say, hey, why don't we trigger some press and just let the world know, look how great we are. We are being extra green. We're looking after Mother Nature. We're looking after the environment, and we're overachieving. Yeah, and it's like a nice thing to share. You're going to win more support from the public and maybe even clients. Sustainability and sustainability tolerance. Yes, there's naturally a focus on the negative tolerance, okay, down this end. But my advice to you, look, don't put your bracket at where legislation lies. Put your bracket, well within inside that. Put your target further up again, and then you've got measurable steps you can take, okay? Hopefully that answers your question. If there's anything else you guys want to know on sustainability, we can cover a bit more. But I think that's where most people want to know of, like, how am I applying sustainability to my projects? Where it's quite new, it's also quite alien, and people want to get used to that. And I think in, let's say, a decade's time, this will become second nature for people, of just having a green state of mind in your projects.
Excellent. I think that's a very good question and very relevant. Next question is from Lal. How do you go through revenue and margin implication if cost is moving from 1 million to 1.3? Sounds a bit like scope creep.
Yes, so we're going back to the school building, the tolerance question there. Okay, let's have a little look. If we've got 1 million and 1.3 million as the upper threshold, okay, and 900,000 down there, okay, forgive me, I know it's a bit of a rushed diagram, but what you'll find is, let's say that we are creeping up further and further and further to this 1.3 million, okay? You in Prince2, you are allowed to, and I go back to something I said earlier, manage by exception, okay? That means you can operate right up to 2.999. You can be right up at this level, and you are still welcome to do whatever you like. Yes, there is a target, and I'm not sure I made enough of a point of that earlier on. There's still a target. There's still an area that you should be aiming for, okay? But it just means that you're welcome to operate up to that level. If you break that level, that's when, and this is quite harsh phrasing, but you lose the right to project manage. Okay, if you break that tolerance, it doesn't have to be 1.3, could be 1.5, could be 2 million, could be 5 million, but whatever the tolerance is, if you break it, you lose the right to project manage and you go up to an executive or a project board. Now, why might this happen? Why do we stray away from the targets? Okay, it could be changes in cost of materials. It could be machinery and hire has changed, maybe from one annual basis to the next, contract management changes. It might simply be that you've had risks and issues that your expenditure to solve these things have spiraled, or perhaps, bear in mind this goes the other way, maybe you overspent, you overestimated what you might spend rather, I've got my tongue all tied now, what you might spend, and maybe you'll look at the negative bracket. What you can do for this, let's say that you are creeping up on the 1.3, as Jean-Paul rightly said there, maybe you could drop out some elements of your scope. Or maybe you might decide to slow the project down. Maybe you've got time tolerance available to you, where actually you're looking like you're going to finish ahead of time. Well, why don't you slow things down? Spend a little less, but take the foot off the gas, slow down the pressures. The tolerances in Prince2, the 7 of them, are like juggling balls and spinning plates, and you can weigh them up against one another and try and balance these out. If the point comes where you can't balance them out anymore, that's where you lose the right to project manage and escalate. Okay. Forgive me, Jean-Paul, I've forgotten exactly what the question was. I may have slightly tangented away there, but
No,
hopefully that answers
I
it.
think you've covered it mainly. Let me read it again just in case. How do you go through revenue and margin implication if cost is moving from 1 million to 1.3?
Yeah, I think that's about right then. And like I say, you can do things to try and pull that in within your tolerance. But if you break tolerance, whatever the revenue margin is, whether that is then looking at eating into your benefits, it's not your responsibility anymore. And it's quite clear cut with Prince2. If you end up breaking that tolerance threshold, maybe you are going to overspend, maybe you're not going to get benefit, but it's not your decision to make anymore. It goes back to that executive. Like I say, I know it's harsh wording that you lose the right to project manage, but it also hits the nail on the head in how hard cutoff this is in Prince2.
Exactly that. Next question is from Sean. I understand that you can now use the online version of the official book. Is that correct? I think that's quite simply, I can answer that for you. Essentially, with your foundation exam voucher, you will have access to the ebook, so the online manual or online handbook. If you do want to purchase an additional hard copy, you can do so, but the minimum included with your voucher for foundation only, I must stress, is the ebook, the official ebook.
Awesome. I'm just going to jump in there as well, John Paul, just on Sean's point. Okay. I don't know the demographic of the guys that have joined today, but if you've done Prince2 before, you were probably a paper-based manual person. Okay. Much the same as myself. Okay. Now, when I came to recertify, because the trainers have to recertify, just for you guys, if you weren't aware, we got to go through it all as well. I chose to use the ebook so that I could put myself in your positions, and I can safely say people have done a fantastic job with it. Yeah, it's very easy to navigate. You can add your highlights, you can add your notes. The navigation system, you've got a complete contents that allow you to jump around the book however you wish. It's a fantastic tool they've got and is available to use. Any notes you make in that ebook are then available to use in the practitioner exam. Yeah, and the copy, your actual copy of the book, is available in the exam. You don't get a blank copy, you actually get the copy you've made the notes in. They've done a really good job with it. So if an ebook is something you're particularly worried about, I must admit I had my hesitations when they went through the change, but I decided, you know what, let's try and understand the point from the candidate's point of view. And I was really pleasantly surprised. I probably shouldn't say surprised. I don't want to do people a disservice, but they've done a really great job with it. So hopefully, Sean, if that's something you're looking into, and maybe others of you guys, I genuinely think it's a great tool you've got. If you still favour paperback, sure, go for it. Some people will, but don't fear using the ebook. And of course, if you've got the ebook anyway, maybe you want to upgrade to paper-based in the future. That's an option for you as well. But I would certainly say go and enjoy the ebook. It's a great tool they've got. Sorry to jump in, John Paul, but I think it's worth maybe an extra point of view.
Definitely. Yeah, no, definitely. And just to reiterate, during the actual live courses, Harley will reference both the ebook reference numbers as well as the actual pages for those that have the hard manuals. So it's all based on preference. Some people prefer the e-version, some people prefer the old-fashioned hard copy. Right, so next question is from Shajuti. Is the foundation qualification still lifetime, or does a new exam need to be taken for version 7? Very good question and a very common question. I'll let Harley answer this.
Absolutely. So with foundation, the rules are foundation still valid for life. Okay. Now, the only caveat with foundation being valid for life is that the value of older foundation certificates is lost over time. Yeah, while you're still a Prince2 foundation successful candidate register noted person, your version that you've sat and the date of which you sat it is noted. Okay, now I'm not going to go any further into it than that. I don't want to start swaying people. I don't like to influence whether or not you do or don't want to resit it, because people get nervous about exams. Sure, I get it. Okay. But if you were someone who maybe sat a Prince2 version 3 or version 4, I would be looking at recertifying. And maybe in today's session, you've seen the people element, sustainability has been added. Some of those processes have shifted slightly from what the old versions were. You know, the Prince2 you knew is not the Prince2 that exists now. If employers are looking, they will expect that you understand the most frequent version of Prince2. It might be worth, if you're a few versions behind, just whipping yourself through that exam once again. It is only 60 minutes after all. But yes, they're still technically valid for life. When you then go on to do practitioner, I'd say having a more recent version is where the biggest benefit comes in, because practitioner, you're not going to know some of the new keywords and so on without having a valid and up-to-date foundation, understanding and certification.
That is, yeah, that is totally correct. I think people get a bit confused with this. Ultimately, when you look on the candidate register, if you do appear on it, when you've done a previous version of Prince2 Foundation, it will say you can recertify the certificate in line with current practice. Okay. But if you have any questions in relation to the versions that you took, you can just give us a call, and we can go through what the options are and what the best course of action is for your circumstances.
Yeah.
Okay, so next question's from Mark. Yeah, and again, this is following on to the recertify side. There'll be several people attending this session that probably have done Prince2 historically, maybe back in the pre-2010 time. And as Harley quite rightly pointed out, the methodology has changed and progressed quite considerably since that point. Now, I'm looking to recertify, have a very, very old Prince2 certificate, but I'm seeing more and more jobs advertising APM as a must, even the MOD now. As a contractor, I'm looking for a certificate that is now most relevant. Any advice on either or?
Oh, it's a great question. Yeah.
It is.
And you're going to get me into opinion-based stuff here, okay? Because I teach APM as well, so I'm going to come at you from a place of non-bias, okay? Prince2 has more rigid structure than APM, and that predominantly comes down to the practices, the processes, and the principles. Yeah, there's a lot of structure in Prince2. APM, however, you explore more alternatives, you get a little bit more freedom, maybe your tolerances aren't quite so tight, but you do also dive into soft skills, a little bit more people management, change management with APM as well. Now, which one's better than the other? There is no right or wrong answer. Which one's more appropriate than the other? There is no right or wrong answer. In truth, whoever asked this question, it might be worth hopping on a call at some point, and we could listen to your environment you're within and maybe get an understanding of that. But both are internationally recognized. I think APM is the only body which you can go through to end up at chartered status, but that's no easy pathway. Yeah, that is a challenge in itself. You've got to go through years of experience, detailing your examples and so on. Whereas I think to get to Prince2 practitioner, the fact that you can go through intensive training and then gain that higher level of certification is great. I would say at the moment, Prince2, because it's so rigid, it's more of a global thing. APM holds up its own here in the UK quite a lot. If you went to the States, maybe you start looking at maybe a CMI or IPMA, things like that. But APM holds up its own here in the UK for sure. You're right in saying that the MOD, governments, the NHS are studying both. Yes, the government might put a lot of their framework around Prince2, but a lot of their teams themselves, they go through APM, particularly the fundamentals training, to cover all bases. Yeah, which I think is great. I don't know enough about your scenario to give you a concrete answer, but ultimately, I hope that gives you just a little bit of insight. The PRINCE2 more rigid and probably more global, dare I say. But here in the UK, APM's holding up its own. It's the only way to get to a chartered project manager status. It's equally as popular, and I think really it just depends on the requirement of where you're going. I don't know enough about you to go any further than that, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I think in simple terms, you've got to remember that the version 7 Prince2 methodology is now in line with current practice of many organizations, especially including the people module and the sustainability. So, that could be one of the motivations as to why people cert have updated the methodology recently. So it is a matter of industry preference on which certificates you do go for. Like Harley quite rightly said, with APM certificates, you can go all the way to a chartered status. And that kind of brings me on to Richard Cameron's question below. So there is a few different pathways that you can take with APM. The initial certificate is called the APM PFQ, so Project Fundamentals Qualification. And that is pretty much an introductory certificate to project management. And then you can move on to what's known as the APM PMQ, Project Management Qualification. That is a lot more in depth and is almost like a jump step. It's like step 1 and then step 3. It is a highly valued certificate. Now, from this point, you can potentially you can bypass the next certificate and potentially get to a chartered status now. So bearing in mind, there's a lot less PMQ certificates awarded in the UK in comparison to Prince2 certificates. Again, all preference depends on the industry. But when you say APM practitioner, I would probably say the closest would be the PMQ in comparison.
And if I just jump in on that, just for a little bit extra on the PMQ, the PFQ, the fundamentals, is 60 marks, 60 minutes, okay, 60% to pass. It's structured the same as Prince2 Foundation in terms of its exam layout. That PMQ, with Prince2 Practitioner, we told you that it's a multiple choice scenario based exam, okay, with some matching style questions. That PMQ, the full project management qualification from the APM, is a written exam, okay. If you want more information on that, we've got all the topics. There was an APM overview session earlier in the week. We can get a recording out to you if you weren't there for that. But the PMQ being a written exam, that might be more your style. Some people prefer being able to justify their argument and say, look, this is why I think I'm right, and express your knowledge. And then there are some people that don't like the idea of writing anything down and like the safety net of a multiple choice exam, of knowing that one answer is at least right. Just something to think about as well, based on maybe your achievability. Maybe you do or don't like exam writing, might push you one way or the other. Just an extra thought for you there.
Yeah, no, for sure. Again, I think a lot of people are on this session and also the previous sessions are just unsure of which way to go. I think with APM, you've got probably a clearer route. However, with Prince2, there is a suite of methodologies that you can do following Prince2. Okay, so we previously covered MSP and various other aspects of the Axelos suite. Now, okay, so next question from Lal. Okay, good question. How much additional discount percentage for attendees today? If you are live on this session and you are sitting on this session live, then it would be 45% upwards for those that are attending these classes, okay, or any of the packages. For exact percentages, do get in touch. Again, sales@spoke.com. And we'll make sure that we give you an extraordinary deal for this particular sale. Okay, so another question from Chris. Apologies, maybe my question is irrelevant as this session is very PM specific. I am a BA, which is the best course to take if we were to take a bit of BA PM role. Which one would add more laurels on longer term for tech career growth. I'm torn in which course fits best.
Okay.
By the way, Harley, enthusiasm felt. Thanks for the presentation. Great stuff.
That's great. I'm pleased. This was Chris, right?
Yeah, it is indeed.
I'm pleased you've enjoyed it, Chris. The truth of the matter is, again, I don't know quite enough about your scenario, okay? But you mentioned the word tech, okay? Now, on buzzwords here, I wonder if you might also benefit from looking at a bit of agile as well, okay? And before I get into too much depth on agile, we do have that overview session's already happened, right, Jean-Paul?
Correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
so it might be worth getting Chris a recording of that. If you weren't there, Chris, you might have attended, I don't know. But I think then you might be able to weigh that up against it, because we've talked about a very linear style of project management here. And if you're coming from that BA tech world, you'll find that agile is a big buzzword. And I'd be surprised if you haven't already heard of that, Chris, and maybe a couple of other you guys here. Have a little look into that. Okay, agile's where, and I'm going to do a very, very basic explanation just before we set you off to go and view recordings. Linear, we've got delivery steps like so, and agile is where we look at loops and sprints and redevelopment. And you see those drawings, those doodles, that's like it's become international, of linear versus agile. This idea of looping, we call these sprints in agile, these loops. Yeah, these are sprints. That might be something you look at, where you go through a sprint, you review it, you see what tweaks you can make, and you go back and you review it, and so on. And I think that's something to look into. Before I go into any more depth here, don't rule out an agile methodology. Have a little look into that as well. I'm not going to get into it for all of the rest of the guys here, but if agile's a buzzword you guys are interested in, and maybe you do work in a sprint type fashion, I think that's great. And I will just throw in the final example for agile. With linear products, a house, for example, you have to build the house and then you hand it over, okay? With agile, you might, and this is where I draw in on the word tech that Chris gave here. With agile, you might be building a website where you build a homepage, you can send the homepage live, so you're getting some benefit from that, while you're then building a payment page, and you send the payment page live and building up incrementally and iteratively a greater product. And then you build a contact us page and send it live, and then your social medias and send it live, and you build things up. Whereas you can't do that with a house, for example. Yeah. And you'll find that a lot of people are still quite linear in their way of thinking, but agile's massively growing. And in truth, if you come on one of my courses, I talk about the benefits of a hybrid model, yeah, which we do discuss in PRINCE2 and APM. If you do go down an agile PM route, you're not likely to talk about hybrid at all. Yeah, you're just going to be drawn into an agile way of thinking. Might be right for you, but maybe have a little look at the blurred lines. There's no one size fits all with project management, in truth. I think this is where I'm on a PRINCE2 overview session, but all of these methods can complement each other, and the best people have an understanding of a variety. That's about as much as I can give on that one, I'm afraid, without getting into agile content.
Of course. So yeah, no, if you want some more information about the agile methodology, you can again give us a call, or I can send you some more further information on that. Just getting in touch with us, sales@spoke.com. Does anyone else have any additional questions to add? There's been a nice flurry of questions, and I think we've covered quite a wide range of areas of PRINCE2 and also other methodologies. Again, if you are sitting on this session to try and establish which methodology to choose, again, give us a call, and then we can give you a directional discussion. So Mark's put on there, how many days is the online training course for PRINCE2? Depends on whether you're attending just the foundation level or both foundation and practitioner. If you attend the foundation level only, then it is 3 days, 9 till 5. If you attend the full foundation and practitioner course, then it is 4 days, 9 till 5. Bearing in mind, the exams are taken separately online from those 4 days. Okay.
And I will just stress, I don't know whose question that just came in there, as the 3+1 is how we refer to it in shorthand here at Spoke. Yeah. the 3+1, there is work that we get you guys to do as self-study. Now, you'll find that I, in particular, won't set homework for the evenings that's of a great level. But after the course, after the end of your 3+1, let's say you are doing practitioner, there's extra study you guys can do, mock papers that we have available to us that we make available to you. And we've got things like tasks and maybe some extra reading as well. There are some pre-reading. We've got recordings of sessions that you can go back and review. We've got an automated system that talks you through the process model. There's lots of extra content. So yes, you get those 3+1, but a lot of the value with our training courses is all the extras you get with it. I've designed a lot of them myself. I'm quite passionate about them, if I may say so. But we don't just like to leave you with a 3+1 training course. You've got your base set of daytime with a trainer such as myself, but we don't just want to leave it there. You've got extra tools that you can go away, revise from, practice with. And it is effectively a case with any qualification. The more you put in, the more you get out. And you see that with people's pass marks. People that score, right up to the 90% and above marks in these exams are the people that just put the most in. And we give you the tools to be able to put that much effort in to secure those top level marks. I must admit, not that the marks show on your certificate, but it gives you that confidence going into exam of, right, let's just get this done. I know I'm going to pass.
And of course, if you get a very high mark at the foundation level, then you've got a very high opportunity to absorb the information and be able to apply it at practitioner level, which is the main reason people attend this course. But to touch on Harley's point, with these courses, they are all inclusive, so you do get a lot of pre-course support. I think with PRINCE2 primarily, and I'm sure Harley would agree with this, learning the terminology of PRINCE2 is part of the battle initially. When it comes to the foundation level, yes, there is a lot of information to go through, but you are supported fully from the beginning and also just before your exams.
I think there's just one more thing I'll throw in here is that the trainers at SPOCE, we try and get to know you. And I think it's a bit awkward for me today to not be able to see and get to know each of you. And I mean, there must be sort of, dozens of you here that I won't be able to get to speak to on a one-to-one basis. But on our training courses, I want to know your background. I want to know what you do. And I want you to come forward with your examples, because then we can teach from a place of your understanding. If you work in maritime or NHS or MOD or wherever you're from, I want to know a little bit about that and see where I can get this to apply. And then post-course, we particularly like, and the trainers at SPOCE particularly like, to know how you're applying it. And we're more than happy to have follow-up calls and questions. We want post-project support. Pass or fail, we will continue to be there for you. We're a resource. We're a part of your network now. It's not just you're with us for 4 days and then it's farewell. I will try and stay in touch with as many of my contacts as possible. I think it's just worthwhile having that network. A wise person once told me, your network is your net worth. Yeah, and I think we do try and stay in touch with as many as you as possible. We like to hear your success stories. And additionally, we might send you the odd lesson here and there. If we've heard some good stuff that we think applies to you, maybe I might reach out and ping you a quick email or hop on a call and see what we can do. It's, I've had a few clients this year that have got in touch 6 months later to say, hey, I've got a bit of a question mark over something we talked about. I'm putting it in real world application now. What does this mean? And we want that connection maintained with you guys, where there's a personal element. You've met me, you've met John Paul today. We're people at SPOCE. We're not a corporate body you're never going to get in touch with again. There's a personal element to us. I think that's one of our core values, particularly for my candidates. I like to make sure I stay in touch with them.
Excellent. So any final questions before we close the session? I agree, Jay. It was a great presentation.
I'm pleased everyone enjoyed it. Sounds like we got some good feedback, guys. Thank you for your questions. I must admit, there have been some fantastic questions.
Excellent. Okay, we'll leave it open for the next couple of minutes. If there's any other questions, please post them in the chat. If you do think of any questions and you forget to ask it until we finish the session, feel free to drop us an email and we'll be quite happy to help you. All right.
Excellent.
Thanks for attending today's session, guys.
Thank you.